Good afternoon. We're going to be talking about Fauci and the committee oversight, the Committee on Oversight and Accountability. The chairman is James Cormer, and the information we're getting from is from a press release published January 8th. Wenstrup releases statement following day one of Fauci's testimony. Now, there's been 2 days so far. Washington, Dateline. Senate Committee on the Coronavirus Pandemic Chairman Brad Wenstrup, Republican congressman from Ohio, issued the following statement after day one of Dr. Anthony Fauci's 2-day. Well, it's interesting they say Dr. Fauci because Brad Wenstrup is also a doctor. So why are they not saying Dr. Brad Wenstrup? They're just calling him Corona Pandemic Chairman Brad Wenstrup. Yet Fauci gets the doctor. Anyways, Dr. Anthony Fauci's 2-day, 14-hour transcribed interview. Dr. Fauci's testimony today uncovered drastic and systematic failures in America's public health systems. While leading the nation's and the world's coronavirus or COVID-19 response and influencing public narratives, he simultaneously had no idea what was happening under his own jurisdiction at NIAID. Did he actually have no idea, or is he just playing stupid? Dr. Fauci signed off on all domestic and foreign research grants without reviewing the proposals and admitted that he was unaware if NIAID conducted oversight of the laboratories they fund. Remember Fauci? We did not fund anybody. Oh, there's no such thing as gain of function. Oh, I'm a toad. Clearly, the American people and the United States government are operating with completely different expectations about the responsibilities of our public health leaders and the accountability of our public health agencies. There is no accountability and there is no trust in public health anymore after this crap, not just in the United States, in Australia, in Canada, in England, in New Zealand, and probably other countries. It is also concerning that the face of our nation's response to the world's worst public health crisis does not recall. Now, let me read that again. It is concerning that the face of our nation's response to the world's worst public health crisis does not recall key details about COVID-19 origins and pandemic-era policies. Let's try to pretend it didn't happen and sweep it all under the carpet. Nearly 1.2 Americans died to a potential preventable pandemic. I look forward to asking Dr. Fauci further questions about mandates, his role in prompting the proximal origin publication. I read that thing when it came out, and I called it bullshit, and I was kicked off of Twitter for saying that. You can't refute what these people say. You're off Twitter, 12 days. Oh, it might have come from a lab. Off Twitter. Anyways. And his policy... Okay, let me read this again. I look forward to asking Dr. Fauci further questions about mandates, his role in prompting the proximal origin publication, which was complete bullshit, and his policy positions related to masks and lockdowns. Tomorrow's testimony will continue the Select Committee's effort to deliver the answers Americans demand and deserve. Takeaways of day one of Dr. Fauci's transcribed interview. Dr. Fauci claimed that he did not recall pertinent COVID-19 information or conversations more than 100 times. Okay, playing devil's advocate, they interviewed the guy for like 7 hours. It's not that hard. If somebody talked to me for me not to remember, several things, but these are things that this guy should have remembered, considering his job and how important these events were at the time. Dr. Fauci profusely, and recall that this is a popular technique that is used by the manipulator. If you go to court, I don't recall. I talked about this on my earlier podcast like a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. I don't recall. That is what you could say. I don't know. I don't recall. Now, nobody can prove what you recall and what you don't recall. So that's the technique. I don't recall. And this is apparently what Fauci is using right now. Dr. Fauci profusely defended his previous congressional testimony where he stated NIH does not fund gain-of-function research in Wuhan, even though, according to Rand Paul and the evidence he gave, he does. He did indirectly, but he did. So they do an arm's length type deal to protect themselves so he could say, he's lying by saying he did not fund gain of function. He could say more literally, he's lying. He did fund gain of function, but he went through the middle organization. So he could say, I did not directly fund gain of function. But he repeatedly played semantics. Again, another manipulator's technique. Oh, I did not have sex with that woman. Sexual relations. That's my Bill Clinton. He repeatedly played semantics with the definition of gain of function in an attempt to avoid conceding that the NIH funded potentially dangerous research in China. China. Why? Why would anyways. Dr. Fauci testified that he signed off on every foreign and domestic NIAID grant without reviewing the proposals. So what was the point of him signing off if he didn't even review them? Just rubber stamp it. So a 2020 email previously released by the Senate committee proved Dr. Fauci was aware of dangerous gain-of-function research occurring in Wuhan, China. Today he backtracked by arguing he should not have stated that as a fact. Well, he stated everything as a fact. The guy's a liar. So what is the email that they're talking about? Let's take a look here. Got to put on my glasses. Old man. They were concerned about the fact that upon viewing the sequences of several isolates of the novel coronavirus, there were mutations in the virus that would be most unusual to have evolved naturally in the bats. Not in bats, in the bats. And there was a suspicion that this mutation was intentionally inserted. The suspicion was heightened by the fact that scientists in Wuhan University are known to have been working on gain-of-function experiments to determine the molecular mechanisms associated with bat viruses adapting to human infection, and the outbreak originated in Wuhan. So this was an email written by Anthony Fauci. These are Fauci's words. From Anthony Fauci, NIH, NIAID, date February 1st, 2020, 11:58 p.m. So at midnight, he writes this to Grigsby Garrett and Brian Harrison, and carbon copy to Lawrence Kerr and Robert Kediak and Francis Collins. So these are Fauci's words. The outbreak originated in Wuhan. Fauci's words. The outbreak originated in Wuhan. This is what Fauci wrote. So, he backtracked by arguing he should not have stated that as a fact. Dr. Fauci was unable to confirm if NIAID had any mechanisms to conduct oversight of the foreign laboratories they fund. All right, day 2. Press release published January 10th, 2024. Wenstrup releases statement following Dr. Fauci's 2-day testimony. Dateline, D.C. Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic Chairman Brad Wenstrup, Republican Ohio, issued the following statement after the second day of Dr. Anthony Fauci's transcribed interview. After 2 days of testimony and 14 hours of questioning, 7 hours a day, many things became evident during his interview today. Dr. Fauci claimed that the policies and mandates he promoted may unfortunately increase the vaccine hesitancy for years to come. He testified that the lab leak hypothesis, which was often suppressed, was in fact not a conspiracy theory. I confess, it is not. After all, I got kicked off Twitter. For saying that the virus may have come from the lab in Wuhan. Kicked off Twitter for saying that it may have. Further, the social distancing recommendations forced. Imagine what they did to doctors. If they just did that to nobody like me on Twitter, what are they doing to doctors? New England Journal of Medicine and the Lancet. Scumbags. Further, the social distancing recommendation forced on Americans sort of just happened. The social distancing, it just sort of happened. I'm the science. And they were likely not based on scientific data. So, further, the social distancing recommendations forced on Americans and people all around the world just sort of happened. They sort of appeared and were likely not based on scientific data. So if they're going to base that not on scientific data and say they did, what other things have they done that were not based on scientific data? Dr. Fauci's transcribed interview reveals systemic failures in our public health system. Systemic failures in our public health system. And shed not just United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, England, all over the place. And shed light on serious procedural concerns. Serious procedural concerns with our public health authority. So the public health authority and the public health system are screwed. It's clear that dissenting opinions were often not considered or suppressed completely, because that is science. If you don't agree with what we're saying, we're going to silence you, because that's what science is. Dogma. Let's burn them at the stake. Should a future pandemic arise, America's response must be guided by scientific facts and conclusive data. Is scientific facts, I assert this, I am the science. Oh, talking like Fauci kills my throat. While we remain frustrated with Dr. Fauci's inability to recollect COVID-19 information that is important for our investigation, others we have spoken to do recall the facts.
I have no recollection. I'm sorry. Would you repeat the question? What's the question again? I'm not sure. I think I don't recall anything from that phone call. I don't recall.
If you notice the timestamps in this video, you'll see that it's not a replay of him saying the same thing over and over again. It is him literally saying it over and over again at different time frames.
I may have, but I don't recall. I don't specifically remember. Do you recall that? I don't recall. I don't recall this. If you show me this now and ask me the question, do you recall this? I'd have to say I don't recall. I don't recall. It's possible, but I don't recall. I'm not sure. Not specifically that I can recall. Again, it's not something that rings a bell with me that I would remember. I don't recall ever. Not to my knowledge. I don't know if they did. I don't recall specifically. Again, I don't recall. It may have occurred, but I don't recall. I don't recall him saying that. I don't specifically recall. I don't recall.
So that was from Texas Lindsay. Yeah, he doesn't recall, but that's only a snippet, because it was over 100 times the guy didn't recall per day. So, we remain frustrated. Other people speak out. They appreciate Fauci's willingness to testify privately in front of the select committee. Look forward to speaking with him, blah, blah, blah. So the key takeaways from day 2. Fauci claimed that the 6 feet apart social distancing recommendation promoted by federal health officials was likely not based on any data. So isn't he the public health? Isn't he the science? So it's likely, we're going to use the weasel word, it's likely not based on data? Shouldn't he know if it is? I don't recall. He characterized the development of the guidance by stating it just sort of appeared. It just sort of appeared. Nobody's to blame. Not me, especially. God damn. Okay. Dr. Fauci acknowledged that the lab leak hypothesis is not a conspiracy theory. Thank you. Wow, isn't that generous of him? This comes nearly 4 years after promoting the publication of the now infamous proximal origin paper that attempted to vilify. It didn't attempt to vilify. It did vilify and disprove. It did not disprove. I read it. I thought, what a load of shit. And at that moment, I had a cold chill down my spine because I realized all these, New England Journal of Medicine, Lancet, these people that you're supposed to respect don't earn it. In fact, I was like, whoa, cold chill. These guys are not trustworthy. So the proximal origin paper that attempted to vilify and disprove the lab leak hypothesis. Dr. Fauci admitted that America's vaccine mandates during the COVID-19 pandemic could increase vaccine hesitancy in the future. So, of course, his mandates during the COVID-19 pandemic could increase vaccine hesitancy in the future, which I think may not be a bad thing given that we don't know the adverse long-term effects of these vaccines. So in a roundabout way, Fauci's dickheadedness has probably saved millions of people's lives from the future. Not from the future, in the future. People in the future, their lives will be saved. Back to the future. Previously, Dr. Fauci advocated that when you make it difficult for people in their lives, why in their lives? Is it just making it difficult for people? That when you make it difficult for people in their lives, as opposed to not in their lives, they lose their ideological bullshit and they get vaccinated. So the ideological bullshit here that they're going to lose is prove it safe. Where's the long-term trials? Are we going to get cancer from this? Are we going to have immune issues from this? Are we going to have, cardiovascular issues? Are girls going to have reproductive menses issues? Are we going to develop pleurisy? These are questions that, it's ideological bullshit, according to the science. Dr. Fauci, Dr. Mengele. Mengele was only evil in a small portion of Europe, whereas Fauci was evil. His evil spread the entire planet. So you could argue, how many people died? What are they estimating now from the vaccine? Like 17 million, 14, I can't remember what it was. 14 to 17 million people. That's a world war of death by Fauci. Dr. Fauci denies allegations that he visited the CIA during the pandemic. Why were we talking about the CIA? Or influenced the CIA's investigations into the origin of COVID-19. He didn't influence them. When American universities approached Dr. Fauci, he advised them to impose vaccine mandates on their students. That was Fauci. He admitted it. Dr. Fauci played semantics with the definition of lab leak. So here we go. This is another technique. Play with the definition, right? What do you mean by gain of function? What do you mean by lab leak? What do you mean by sexual relations? Fauci is to gain of function what Bill Clinton is to sexual relations. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, or whatever he said. Fauci, I did not have gain of function with that virus. Or the virus. Dr. Fauci played semantics with the definition of lab leak in an attempt to cover up the inaccurate conclusions of proximal origin. Let me read this again. Fauci played semantics with the definition, so he's using deceptive rhetorical devices in an attempt to cover up the inaccurate conclusions of proximal origin. This is from an official government press release. It is impossible for Dr. Fauci to defend the conclusion of this publication while simultaneously acknowledging that the lab leak is possible. I mean, you would have to be at this point so stupid to not believe that the most plausible origin of the COVID-19 was from the Wuhan lab, the Wu flu, funded in part by Dr. Anthony Fauci, who was funding gain-of-function research. What do you got here? We have, okay, let's see what the Vigilant Fox posted from Rand Paul. I like calling him Paul Rand. Sounds more like a real name. Right? Although, I wonder if he's named after Ayn Rand. I don't know, it'd be interesting.
I've been trying for 3 years to get the NIH to reveal the gain-of-function deliberations. I know they talk about it. I know they have a weekly meeting on dangerous research, and yet they will not reveal the discussions and who made the final decision to exempt the Wuhan research. But it'll go down in history as maybe one of the worst public policy or medical decisions ever made in the history of our country. The mainstream media has failed to see this, but millions of people died, and it's related to a funding decision by Anthony Fauci to fund dangerous research in China, and they've given him a pass, but I don't think history's going to be so kind, and I hope the deposition today and tomorrow will help bring more truth to this, but I know he's evasive. He testified in Missouri versus Biden, the free speech case, about him and others trying to squelch things on Twitter and Facebook, and I think he said, I don't recall, over 100 times. He said he didn't recall the bat scientist in Asia because he has trouble with Asian names, was his excuse. He also didn't remember meeting certain people that we know he had face-to-face meetings with in February of 2020 in the White House as the pandemic's erupting. He's like, oh, I don't remember. I might have met that person. So he's a dissembler at the very least. That's the best light I can put on it. But I hope we get to some of the truth today.
Good meme here. John's memes. The myocarditis means it's working. All right, that's it for Fauci for today. Go away.